All right, welcome, guys. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Oh, good.
Hey, I'm going to put yourself on mute, or you have already. Perfect. Please do chime in. We have some allocated time for everybody to ask questions, Q&A, and all that. So we are just about to start. And welcome, everybody, again. I see many familiar faces and new ones as well. So welcome to ncBuilders, along with nReach and Fractional CMO Group. We are doing a masterclass today about top 10 practices on product launch. And I hope you get a whole lot out of this. So here we are. Myself, Pren Shah, I am the CEO and co-founder of ncBuilders. Along with me, I have Mitch Posada from nReach Venture Studio Partners and Shulkin from Fractional CMO Group. These two, I know them for a while now, especially Mitch, and they are experts in their fields. I'm really, really excited to have them presenting this webinar. Can we go on the next slide? All right, there we go. So this is the topic of the day, Startup Founder Master Webinar Series on top 10 product launch ideas. What are the best practices? We'll get some strategic marketing insights and also, you know, how we propel our big idea to our successful launch. Can we go to the next slide? There we go. This is it. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, here we go. So this is an introduction. I know, as I said, many new faces, so I'm gonna give a tiny bit of a brief on who we are and what we do. So ncBuilders.club, C-L-U-B. We are a Chicago community that fosters entrepreneurship. We have about 160 on our platform. We call that a venture collaboration platform. And we also have about 850 plus as of yesterday, who has signed up on our couple of meetups, which is essentially our community. We do a whole lot of events. We like to do that every couple of months. We had one on Monday, and I see many of the folks on this webinar were present on that Monday event. So thanks again, guys, for making it. And we do a whole lot of events like pitch nights, brainstorming nights, networking nights, and there's a lot more exciting events coming up real soon, so please stay tuned and join our platform, ncBuilders.club. I'm gonna have Mitch here introduce himself. Mitch.
Yeah, sure. First of all, welcome everyone who's attending today, and then for those who are getting on the recording afterwards. I'm the founder of nReach. We're a hands-on executive team that eliminates tech startups' to-do list. Help you reach milestones, go to market, and raise institutional rounds of capital.
Thank you, Mitch. Ron?
Yeah, thanks, Pren. So I love launching new products, and my focus is really on helping B2B companies find their voice. And I work on demand with a lot of companies, mostly startups, but also mid-market. And my approach is to troubleshoot marketing strategies and sales efforts. And, you know, the result is we develop compelling stories. So I always like to measure my success by looking at what kind of revenue increases we have. But I think if it's okay with you, Paren, I think we'll just dive into the presentation. Is that
yes,
okay?
Please.
Yeah. So again, let me echo what Mitch said. Thanks for joining us. You know, our hope today is to give you an inside look at how we think when we help develop products and launch products into the market. So it's sort of like an inside look of, I always like to call these anatomy of a product launch, because you're going to get a feel for all the different parts that compose the whole. And so I like to start out by saying, you know, B2B marketing doesn't have to be a mystery. You know, often startup founders are primarily technologists or engineers, but, you know, so marketing can be a whole new territory. They're smart people, they can look it up, but you've got some choices. You can learn marketing trial by ear, collecting experiences as you go along, gradually getting better at it. Or, you know, today we're hoping to provide you these insights into best practices. It's sort of a shortcut to give you a leg up. So let's face it, as a startup founder, you have a lot of responsibilities. You need to keep a lot of balls in the air. And properly marketing your offering requires very specific attention to a whole bunch of details. And so you're juggling all these things. You're raising money, developing product, also creating compelling stories and reaching your buyers. That's a lot to be a master of. So I'm just going to extend the metaphor a little bit about juggling. There's one ball you can't drop, and that's, as a startup founder, you need to have constant situational awareness. That means you need to keep your eye on the ball. So we know that things change, and so we all need to be prepared to pivot. And marketing is being constantly responsive to changing conditions. But the good news is there's some well-documented, proven best practices to develop a product that you're going to hear about from Mitch and assemble a marketing strategy, which is where I'll chime in. So we're going to cover these from a high-level review perspective. Obviously everybody in this audience has got their own unique needs. That's not what we're doing today, but happy to chat with you after this. And also, I just want to take a deep breath and encourage you to enter your questions in on the chat line. We've got some clear breaks in this presentation to take a look at those questions and try and answer them as we go along. So, best practice number one, strategy is key. And it's so important that I want to say that strategy trumps tactics. So, my clients often start out our conversations with something like, hey, Ron, should we do a webinar or run LinkedIn ads? Which leads us to talk about a great place to start this overview, which is really best practice number one, strategy first and then tactics. Seems like a simple cart and horse scenario. And then when you do have a strategy, memorialize it in a playbook. That's what that icon's about. So everybody on your team can take a look at it and be on the same page. So sometimes, we're all smart people. We can look up what the latest marketing outreach tactics are. And we can feel busy by diving directly into them and executing all these tactics. But, this approach rarely yields sustainable positive results. So just as an example, you realize you're getting a lot of leads, but they're all unqualified, and your business development group are upset that they're wasting their time. Or you send out outreach via email and unsubscribes start going up because you're hitting on them too often instead of with accurate message. And I always like, this is a picture of Sun Tzu. I like this one line, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So it feels like we're busy, but it's a lot of action without too many results. So another way to think of this is a different metaphor. Your marketing strategy is your game plan. This is when you all put your heads together, research, figure out how you're going to move forward with rolling out your product. And like any game plan, it needs to be well researched if it's going to be great. And then the tactics is our little Air Force colonel there in a cockpit. Marketing tactics serve to deliver on that strategy. This guy follows the game plan. So, here's the truism. A well-researched marketing plan will inform all the tactical choices you'll have to make. Once you're armed with a strategy, you'll easily know what tactics to use. You won't have to ask anybody. You won't have to ask whether to do a webinar or pay for LinkedIn ads. Your marketing strategy is really going to make all those choices apparent. And we're going to get to this later, but as you develop your strategy and you do all your research, it'll also inform your messaging, your content, your tactical choices. Putting together a strategy is not going to be a mystery because you're going to be so well informed. So here's a good time to see if anyone in the audience has questions on what we covered so far. I'm going to take a look in the chat, see if there's anything listed.
Yeah, please do speak up, unmute yourself, or send me a private message as well, and I will be happy to relay the question. I have a question from Erin. Erin, you want to speak up, or you want me to talk? All right, I can talk. Perfect. So Erin has a question. Do you recommend certain resources for conducting research?
We're going to cover that here, my approach, but, there's a fancy name for it, qualitative research, but at its essence, at its heart is talking to experts. And, you're going to learn so much. And I'll dive in deeper for, all the components of that. So, I think the resources is find someone who's a lookalike buyer and buy them coffee. And by the way, I find people are very generous when you ask people for advice. They seem more than kind and want to tell you.
Correct.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Mitch. By the way, we got a bunch of other pit stops here for questions. So,
any other questions? Anybody wants to say anything or ask a question? All right.
There's other opportunities. Just get them in the chat, or would be the easiest because we can open it up and read what's on there. So,
Right.
So I started off with strategy and then tactics, but let's take a step back for a second and start with, how did we even get here? And this is a good place for me to turn it over to Mitch.
All right, thank you, Ron. So often the how folks get started is by asking a simple question, which is both longer term and short term, which is, have we picked a problem worth solving? So very much focused on the problem first. So the next few slides, I'm going to provide some different perspectives is that you may need to actually revisit regardless of where you actually start. And the most common perspective is to solve a problem, a hurdle that you already face, and thus you know it intimately. Also, as you see here, you should try to observe a problem and then solve it. And I see a lot of examples of this, founders applying successful methods from, say, other industries, adding a little twist, and then coming up with a fresh perspective. So it's part observation, part applying know-how from somewhere else. Next, we see some founders trying to anticipate a problem and solving it. And these are often, I see, drawn from like parallels from the past that are poised to go through, say, a similar adoption and growth pattern. And most of this is caused pretty evidently now by technology advances. So you have CRISPR, blockchain, 5G, and some of these things as they evolve and get a little bit more ready for market, it ushers in a whole new wave of innovation, but often leveraging on patterns of how those things got adopted and grow from the past. So a lot of people are just truly trying to anticipate this problem that are going to arise as a result of these new technologies, and then solving those. So that's also a great perspective. Again, you may solve one and then realize you have to like get ahead of the curve and solve something else. Another is quite fanciful and often hard to do, but you see things like usually some of the big dominant innovations like an iPhone, et cetera. They're basically creating a problem and then solving some of the problems that come with it after they've created it. And that's typically thinking way ahead in the future. So those do come about, but they're a little bit trickier. But it's definitely how people get started or pivot into. So then you probably then need to ask, like, well, okay, that's fine. How we got started is that first initial lens, but then, okay, what problem, but for whom? Who are you trying to sell it to? And so see, these are some of the basic verticals that people initially start with and sometimes have to pivot. So you may start, and the most common one is you start off in, let's say, B2C, and then you shift to B2B2C because you can find that you identified a pain that incumbents aren't solving in a good way, but it's just really hard to scale. So then you, instead of competing with them, you go sell to them. That's number one, the most often pivot. So it's useful to know kind of where you're starting and where, because you may need to pivot to a different vertical. Then in that same vein, you have folks testing one way to approach the market, which is a direct way of approaching the market. And then also then finding it might be easier to pivot or add on channels. So these are some of the decision making that you need to do as you go through. But then also, as I was mentioning, go back and potentially revisit. Do we just go direct now? Do we look at sales channels? As you start answering these questions, make sure that you think about them ongoing. So then another thing you need to do to figure out if you solve a problem worth solving is the market within the problem fit in a context of a market that's compelling. So here you're asking the basic questions of fundamental questions of like size, growth, competition. Is it a market that's fragmented? Is there an ability for you to expand? But then ultimately, what portion of the market is addressable by you? Next, you want to look at within the market, how can you grow grow with the market or grow in the market? So, sorry, grow the market itself or grow in the market? And this is definitely a strategic question that we're going to be addressing a little bit more. And so you have to answer that through a step process by where you're validating where your growth potential will come from. So you're looking at those different lenses. Again, going back up, which market, which verticals, what problem am I solving? And then what you're trying to get to is you have some traction in a segment. Let's say you're like hip deep into a segment. And then you're asking, do you see the potential to go deeper into that segment? Or should you move more horizontally and add another segment? Yeah, there you go. So you want to see if you can dive deeper or if you need to pivot into another segment and go more horizontal. But ultimately, you're trying to ask and or share with confidence to your investors that you can beat enough of your competition to get a foothold in the market, to be a target for investment and or acquisition. So can you win? So I'll pause there, take a quick sense for questions on what I just reviewed, and then we'll continue moving.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So I see 4 other individuals join. Dev, welcome. Wanted to this is one of the pit stops for the new guys who joined. Conrad, hey, how are you? And I've kept everybody on mute for now, but this is the time where we speak up. If you have any questions, either message me personally or do speak up. And I do have a question from Mahan. What are some of the resources or websites for getting legit market data on product, market size, and etc.?
Great question. I have I can answer that, but probably via email. So I'll send it to Perrin to send out to whoever participates.
Yes, I have Mahan's question. Anybody else on the call want to answer that? Because this is a very tricky question and it depends on what kind of market data we are talking about. It's a huge world out there. I can at least speak from my field of experience with market data, and obviously we have QuantL, which is what provides you a whole lot of quantitative data on stock market analysis, for example, right?
I just want to say, this is Ron. Every time I research a vertical market, I end up going to a different resource. I mean, I could go back to a government statistical analysis or Statista or something like that, but each one, the meat of what you're looking for could easily be in a different location. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Brent.
No, all good.
Yeah, likewise. Like it takes a little bit of digging, but there's almost every industry has some level of research associated with it and associations, et cetera. And now there's just so much information everywhere. So it just takes some artful constructing when it comes to market data research. But people are always publishing size of market, et cetera. But anyways, there's definitely some resources to look into for trying to address, and also a structured way of trying to address the market. And I'll try to, like I said, I will share that afterwards.
Yeah, Mahan, if you have any specific targeted question, do forward it to me, and I'll let Mitch answer that question. I'll connect you guys. There's a second question from Lavanya. At what point would you know you have to pivot to different market segment, and based on what data?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, I think, it's not a batch process when you sell into a market. It's interactive. That's that, keep your eye on the ball and be prepared to change, be prepared to pivot all the time. You're going to find out from feedback from your target clients and prospects that maybe you need to tweak your approach. Sometimes the opportunity lies as you learn, when you discover there's an adjacent space that I really should be in. I'm just learning about it now. So I worked with one company, 3Radical. They had a consumer engagement product for long-term, interactive, ongoing relationships, buildings for brands. And, I think we were 6 months into it when it became apparent to me that this is also perfect for employee engagement. And that company has got 2 really up and running businesses that are both thriving, one for consumer engagement and one for employee engagement. And they're, different buyers, often different companies, different needs. So But that's a good question. That's that keep your eye on the ball and your finger on the pulse thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would answer is like you think you always have to do concurrent segment discovery, so that you can answer that question more quickly. If you wait too long to then finally realize this segment just isn't going to adopt fast enough, we can't find these early adopters, and if you weren't doing any kind of concurrent segment discovery, even just with the same solution. So you can change one or two things. You can still chase the same problem, come up with a different solution, validate who cares about that different solution, and that might point you in the right direction, or which maybe it's the same customers, but they just like the solution better. So you iterate on that. And some people do that a couple times before they finally find something, or some people just completely take the same solution, but to go find, a different buyer. They just try to like see if they can match it, and that you're doing. That's what I'm calling sort of segment discovery. So you kind of, that's again to the ball juggling metaphor. You have to kind of be doing enough of those. But if you have say 20 conversations in a certain segment with the same solution, and you think you have identified that these are all not the same buyer, like clearly you maybe have talked to a couple early adopters, and I'll later in the talk help you figure out what are the signal that you're talking to an early adopter. But if you're talking to a bunch of them and they're not buying, then then you're not probably solving a priority pain, or your solution isn't the right solution, et cetera. And then you have to like get ready to pivot. And some of the pivots you can do are addressed above different, maybe it's, well, if you're addressing something you think is painful, but you're not getting enough traction, that's when you may have to pivot your go-to-market channel, which vertical, those kind of things. But those are the questions you need to be asking at all times.
Hey, Mitch, a quick note. When you speak, there's a little static comes in and out. So just FYI.
Okay.
Any other questions? I have two questions. I have one personally on my phone and another one on the screen, but I'm going to read first come, first serve. This is a long question, so Mitch and Ron. We have a $10,000 MVP that has produced 700 plus users to join and interact. So this is one of our entrepreneurs that we know. We have learned a lot and know where we need to go. The next product has been completely designed, full user stories, full clickable prototype. We have not yet monetized the platform, though we have 6 different revenue streams planned over the next 3.5 years. We are raising around, and it's really chicken and egg. We need another investment to get this built. Yet the stats being the, consistent engagement and all those numbers. I think the investors are looking for won't come until the next iteration. Thoughts on how to get investors on board using the stats we have from our crappy yet fruitful MVP?
So I'm sorry, the question is, we've got all these users signed up and we're not producing revenue. Investors want to see revenue from the progress we've made so far. And what are the next steps to convert our user community into revenue producing crowd of people? Is that the question?
Yeah, so they have all this different traction that's going on, right? They have revenue streams lined up. They've also raised some money in the past. They have some sort of a workable MVP, but they'll need to get another investment to get the whole, make it look good and extra features and all that. How do you kind of pursue these investors, even when you have, not so jazzy MVP?
Oh, well, I think the answer is in the question. You need to show a strategy for converting users into revenue, whether it's ad-based, I know I was surprised when Facebook found revenue that way. But there, freemium approaches where you get 75% of what you want, but if you really want the rest of the stuff, you have to buy into it. Monthly plans versus annual, so people don't feel like they're spending too much money when they take those first steps. You could always upsell them later. Just depends on the product, the market. I think you need to prove it. I think your investors are right. Perhaps maybe you do need to prove it to them, even if you haven't executed on the strategy that you're developing.
Yeah, I would concur. I think you need to, it's always a tough spot to be in, but early stage investors can't take as many risks as you think you want them to take. And so anything that translates to risk reduction, you know, letters of intent, you know, advanced subscription, you have to kind of try to validate even before the feature set
What do you guys think
is put in
of?
place.
What do you guys think of the consistent engagement from users? Could that be leveraged?
It's helpful. It's I think it's helpful. But if I'm an investor and taking a look at it, it's just fine. You've given me some you know, evidence. It's given you the learning that's given you the insight that you need to change and what to change to. And so, but now you're back into the I need to build the MVP for that new insight, and you're back to where you were before. And unfortunately, you kind of you got a little bit more learning, but if you can show how you've leveraged that and how the next iteration of learning is going to be a lot more reduced, then they're like, all right, well, you're going to figure it out faster this time, so I'm more willing to give you. So you have to kind of like address it that way. Proof.
I want to spin out of what Mitch said there. You know, you get to try different things. Nobody knows your market and your subject matter and your product better than you. Go trust your hunch and try and convert people. You know, innovation is recognized as a positive thing. The trick is fail fast. If it doesn't work, then move on to the next one. People don't care about false starts. I mean, there's that famous long list of companies that all started out in different industries. So that's one comment. The other one is it sounds like you already have things of value. You have proven the value of your offering. You know, every pitch, not everyone, but almost every pitch deck that I see, the last closing comment, the one more thing at the end is, by the way, we're collecting a ton of data that has value and we could sell. Maybe you have the data today that you could somehow leverage and get money, and you won't have to give away any more shares of your company to investors. You could just use it from revenue.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. And do message me more if you have any more to follow up on this.
Brand, do you want to table the rest of the questions till the next pit stop, which is only in like 10 slides away or something?
All right. I have one more question, and I will carry on with that at the next pit stop.
All right, good. We'll have one. So I think it's my turn to take over the deck here a little bit. There we go. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about, we sort of headed in this direction already, you know, identifying your optimal market. So, you know, investors want to see you focus on one thing, because if you tell them all the different things your product could do and all the places you could sell it, they're thinking of themselves. I don't know if they'll voice it out loud, but they're going to think, this guy or gal, this person's too scattered. You know, they need to focus. So I always say, narrow it down to a group, one group, and get to know them very, very well. Pick one, pick a market, pick a vertical, and become well-versed in it. And then, you know, work to become part of that community. These are your people. So, you know, you need to become someone that everybody's familiar with. And you get to know them by listening to them. There's that resource for research that someone asked about before. When I talk to lookalike prospects, current clients, my network, all these different people, and people representing every discipline, you know, talk to a technologist, talk to a marketing guy, talk to a finance guy. And by the way, I don't mean anything gender specific with those guys. But, you know, the hat I put on when I have those conversations is pretend you're a detective, you know, or a newspaper reporter. You know, be genuinely curious and learn everything you can. You know, ask them about their client challenges. Ask them about their goals. Learn how they make buying decisions. You know, a lot of companies in the same industry have very similar processes. And most importantly, you know, here's that be part of the community. Ask what you could do for them. What can I do for you? How can I help you? I want to be part of this. I'm not here just to kick down the door, tell you my story, and sell you. So I always ask clients and prospects what they think and ask how I could help them. And as I said earlier, most people are very generous when I call, and they express a genuine interest in giving their feedback. So I learn something on every call. And when I work on behalf of a client, they think I'm so smart. Well, I got smart by talking to experts along the way. So, you know, as I said earlier, this is qualitative research. the stuff that you're learning from your clients. And it'll help you pick a market. It'll help you with your eventual, it'll inform your messaging. You're going to collect so much information and your content. You know, your buyers have industry jargon. They speak about stuff in a certain way in their business. They think in a wholly different, unique way. And going through this process, you'll really be enabled to tell your story in a way that buyers will hear it. They'll understand what you're saying because you'll be speaking their language. And so while getting to know the buyers in your space, hopefully you're smart enough to work on building relationships. You should be working to be a reliable member of this tribe. You know, you want to be known as a problem solver. And be authentic, be your real self, and you'll earn a place as a trusted advisor. And then selling comes later. You're not going to have to ask for meetings. When people, you just ask for relationships and LinkedIn connections. When they take a look at your LinkedIn profile, they're going to say, geez, this is somebody I ought to talk to. And I like to point out, because the modern era, so much is texting and social media, but social networking is not networking. It's important, don't misunderstand me, but you need to get out there, go to events, industry events, general networking events, shake hands, you know, express a genuine interest in other people. And when you research by talking to your future customers, you'll learn a lot. It informs the design of your selling approach. And I'm going to just dive down for a second and help you understand what the methodology is as you discover your market and what they want. Hopefully this will help them all make sense. So think about it this way. You know, you want to get to the diagnosis and the eventual prescription for what your clients want to buy. So, you know, you're going to spot trends by talking to clients. And I've had experiences where I talked to 3 different chief marketing officers of really big companies in the same week. They all told me the same thing. You know, Ron, not interested in what you're talking about, but I really want this. And I knew for sure that I eyeballed a trend just then. And I maybe have been the only person to know it for one brief moment. I may only be a couple of days ahead of everybody else, but you're going to learn things. And I always say you publish. So as you monitor trends and publish results, you know, it leads to a perception in your space that you're a thought leader. It buys you credibility. This thought leadership status, it'll lead to office invitations. You'll get meetings. And when you go there and you share compelling stories about your offering and what you've heard from this person's peers in those meetings, it leads to your prospect having trust in you, enough trust to let you conduct discovery, because you have a lot of questions. You don't want to start selling something until you know what they're buying. And then when you conduct discovery should be first, you uncover the real pain points. And if you can collaboratively with your prospect assign a dollar value to each of the solutions you provide to relieve that prospect's pain, it could lead to a sense of urgency. And the reason why that's important is because what if they say yes and nothing happens? By having this urgency and this actual cost justification associated with it, you get to say to them at some point, you know, every day you delay your decision, we talked about this, you yourself said it was worth $5,000 a day. You know, we're going to delay another 2 weeks. We're just racking up losses that you could be realizing. So your work, providing solutions to challenges, is the name of that tune, and it will lead to new clients. And so you end up with, as a result of that process, these are cost-justified solutions you're bringing to the market. They address your clients' challenges. They help them achieve their goals. And that is an easy sell. So here's a good time again to see if anyone in the audience has any questions on what we covered so far. Corinne, do you want to host those questions?
Yeah. So we have one from Conrad. How do you possibly solve the timing aspect of markets? For example, Uber wasn't the first private taxi provider with a lot of things lined up for them. Is it even possible to create timing?
Great question. I think there's a lot of luck involved, but you got to be poised. And I find a lot of heavy lifting happens even before you're actively chasing a market, or if you do and you have to pause. Sometimes it is definitely a timing issue, especially as you see a lot of this waves of technology. I'm dating myself, but I haven't seen a few coming from the Silicon Valley.com days. And some of the stuff is just like, oh, this is a no-brainer. And it just took years, like 5 years for mobile to take off. So there's a lot of those things that timing is definitely is definitely a barrier you have to overcome. The best place to try to figure out how to solve some of those trends are the research groups that are really looking into the future. Gartner or anything, especially on the B2B side, it's a little bit easier. Sometimes on the business to consumer side, you can find just those folks who are doing trend, because they dig deeper into what helps move a market or what helps identify, what is going to trigger, adoption. And then you have to have those hypotheses and ideally test those out ahead of time. But oftentimes, just if you wait too long because you're trying to time it just right, you just don't learn. So if you can show that your team can learn faster than anybody else, that's oftentimes what you need.
Yeah, that's a great line, Mitch. And by the way, all the startup founders are bringing new innovations to the market. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. And there's a lot of different kinds of innovation, but it's a finite list of types. And I actually have a filter on my website and an infograph that might help you. I got a note from a patent attorney that said she keeps a copy in front of her so she can remember how to classify these. But if you have a breakthrough innovation, that means the market's up and running, and you could just do it better than everybody else out there. You've got a breakthrough that's going to make this easier, faster, better. Something about it is a winner that'll help you gain market share. And if you have a disruptive innovation, you're going to cause the market to operate completely differently than they ever have before. Then the time is when you make it. You're a market maker, and your window is starts closing the day you announce and introduce it, because everybody's going to be scrambling to keep up. So, and sometimes there are market makers in the space already. I love competition in that sense. It's like they're making a market. I'm going to dive in and get my share. So that's one of the things I think it gets back to that. Keep your eye on the ball thing and be prepared to pivot. Pay attention, see what's happening out there, and sometimes you just have to, I told my dad I wanted to open up this business as a fractional CMO. He says, there's never a right time. The time, you better just decide to go ahead and do it. And I thought that was great advice.
And you know what? I'll chime in a bit on this. This is one of my favorite topics. And I do come across a whole lot of new entrepreneurs through ncBuilders. And I recently spoke with somebody about exactly this, creating timing and creating market. When Apple came around with their little music boxes, tiny little ones, we had all these many different ways of listening to the music that was already out in the market. But they came out with this little tiny iPod, and they just ran with it. They created the whole hoopla around it. They created a brand new design and an ecosystem around it. So they not only created the product, but they also created a timing and the market in my eyes. It just kind of opened up a whole new segment, including when they did it with iPhone. So it is very much there for you to create, but a lot of time it depends on the luck, obviously. We had Facebook was strategically targeted students in their early phase, which kind of, was it by luck? No, that was strategy. They started on a campus, and okay, starting on a campus is luck. It's not under your control, but we had Friendster and MySpace and everybody before that. But just because the segment they were in the market of students, going from Harvard to Stanford to MIT to Yale and Purdue, it just kind of created their timing for them. So even when the world wasn't ready, they did not know that they wanted that product, they actually made it happen. So where you are in your venture, and even matters in physically, and if you're in Silicon Valley versus starting a new venture in a small town out of nowhere, it matters when you create the hoopla, who notices you, how many, it all, and luck. Yeah, so there's a whole different aspect of this.
Parind, I want to be sensitive to our attendees' time. A lot of them only put aside.
Let's go forward. Yeah.
So we may elide past some of the questions and capture them and get back to you, but we'll try and whip through our slides. So we talked about creating a tight story that buyers and investors can appreciate easily. It's a good time for me to turn it over to Mitch again. Mitch, did you want to dive in?
Yeah. So, and I'll answer a little bit of the former question with this series, because it's all about what investors are looking for. And I think investors are a little bit, going back to the last question, are astute at identifying a fast follower that's going to just solve the like a first market maybe created, identifies there's some problems, identifies ways of solving that problem, but then maybe they're chewing too much, the market's too big, it's not mature. So smart investors will look for a fast follower. And I think Corinne hit it on the nose, like a fast follower that's hitting a faster growing segment that then can go back and solve all the other problems or the other segments is probably the way to win in that scenario. So that's hopefully one illustration. But I see a lot of pitch decks, and for me, the best pitch deck's kind of a little bit of a mix of a founder conversation telling a story that balances also the interests of what an investor. So investors are looking for companies that are likely to succeed, and one thing they use to determine that is the market size of the opportunity. Businesses that can serve millions or even billions of users, and the ones that can earn also billions in revenue is what they're ideally shooting for. And then companies chasing a big market opportunities are also have to go hand in hand with founders that are eager and to put themselves into building that kind of business, because that's a much more stressful business to build. Something fast growth, high growth that needs to accelerate to even win the market. And they have to, not only you pick a good market, but if they don't get a sense that you're going to be able to go attack it aggressively and win, then they're not going to invest you. They're going to go look for that idea in another team. So this is where you want to just overlap your vision and the investor vision, those two perspectives. Another thing that investors prefer are painkillers over vitamin fixes. And this is because they want to know you can more easily capture, harness the motivation and a willingness to pay. And willingness to pay and motivation comes when there's more pain. So another way of saying that is like, is it a must-have or a nice-to-have? But the pain metaphor typically was very popular 10 years ago. I don't know if it's used as much now, but the insight is very clear. Solve the pain over a vitamin. So, and an illustration of it, exactly this is not only does it need to be a painkiller, but for the customer in question, it has to be a priority pain. Most people say like it's a top 3 priority pain. And this you do through your customer interviews. You're trying to get a sense for that early adopter. So the higher up in the stack, the better. And Hiten Shah has been a very successful entrepreneur. He created a bunch of products that were super well liked. Like they were like darlings on like Product Hunt, actually pre-Product Hunt. But people liked it, but it wasn't solving a priority pain. So he ended up killing them. So just because you get a lot of adoption, be careful that if you're not solving a priority pain, that you may have a cool thing that just lasts for half a second, and it's a trend business or a feature. Oftentimes those turn into features for someone else that's solving a bigger problem. So investors like to know that you've validated who will pay and how much people will pay. In particular, if you extend that, they want to know that you can articulate how many customers need your product and how badly do they need it. And you can get that through voice of customer, like you're talking to the customers, and you can translate that into a conversation with an investor. And then outside of that, even better if you can show that the market, as I was alluding to earlier, is growing at a fast clip, or is poised to grow, like a category that because of certain either legislation or something's going to happen, that it's going to start taking off, or a big entrant comes in and you just know it's going to move the market. So they appreciate that you are targeting a high growth segment. They're also going to look for how defensible is that segment that you've just decided to go into, or is the segment just good enough because it's going to be highly transferable to you going to other segments, so you can just get a foothold and then keep marching along. But and you have to express that in how you present to an investor. Some investors are looking for founders who, like them, see big shifts, as I mentioned, that are poised to capitalize on it. So GDPR regulations gaining traction in the US, California. FAA's just recently announced some guidelines for autonomous air vehicles. This is drone delivery. So the consumer market's now going to start exploding. And then just if you keep track of 5G and blockchain and some of these things, that infrastructure, once it gets settled, starts to then accelerate innovation. So are you poised? Then outside of that, investors are, as I was mentioning, they're They're definitely looking for, are you building barriers to entry? And they really like it when that's just baked into the whole business model. So investors like to know that not just everyone's going to compete once others see what you're doing. So they love to see that you've built those barriers into your product and even in your marketing strategy. Another thing investors will look for, because all products have competition. So a logical question they're going to ask is, why your product? Is it 10 times better? And this is because customers don't like to change. You have to be a lot better to justify a switch. And when they do switch, you need to think of the same thing happening to you. Make it really easy for them to stick with you for a long time. So you have to start, again, going back to the whole barriers to entry. And you may not need to start 10x with the early adopter segments. In fact, you don't. That's how you find an early adopter. But you will need to show how you're going to get there when you start addressing a broader market. So with that, pause here for a second.
Yeah. By the way, I just wanted to say, we're going to run out of time. It's not the top 3 best practices. It is the top 10. I don't think we'll go too long, but we're going to go past the top of the hour. So
all right, so let's go. Let's keep going.
Well, for those of you that have to split, go ahead. We'll get you a copy of the on-demand version. You can pick it up where you left off. But we're going to plow through to the end and make sure everybody's got all the information they need. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mitch.
No, yeah, that's good. I'm going to go faster. So putting on our product hats, I want to quickly walk through some perspectives, navigate you through that testing your solution hypothesis, because you've identified a problem. Now you got to go test your solution. A primary perspective that I highly recommend taking is this whole, what job are you solving? And a great example is Henry Ford, who is famous for not thinking about the job being, I need to have a faster horse, but getting from point A to B more quickly. So taking that and taking it a little bit further, a lot of people tend to want to focus on the product. This is what it does. These are all the features, but really what they're buying with a skateboard is an emotional benefit. And so that's what you want to try to dig into. What are they really buying? So the next slide is that jobs to be done framework that I highly recommend. It's pioneered by Clay Christensen and also was mostly introduced and had a lot of success at Intuit. And it forces you to break down the main job and related jobs, but really think and separate functional versus emotional benefits and really digging in deeper and having answers to those questions, because that's going to give you a lot of insight that you can then apply in your marketing strategy. Another useful tool sometimes is getting at use cases and defining what the use cases, because I know Ron's going to spend a little bit of time on that, is identify a use case and then figure out, well, why is someone going to buy that? So why are you going to get hired? So think of that use case, figure out how you're getting hired, and then conversely, think of like, why would you get fired? Like, why would that thing that you just figured out that you got hired for is also going to get fired? And that's how you then articulate or figure out what the product needs to be and what your solution hypothesis. So sort of in summary, think of 10X, think of barriers, think of solving a pain, think of prioritizing which, make sure that the problem you're solving is a priority in your customer, at least the early adopters. Use jobs to be done framework. Use little techniques like firing and getting hired and getting fired. And then I don't know if we need to pause here. We can probably continue going through. Ron, to you, since use cases, I bring it up. You have some good rules.
Yeah, we'll have more opportunities for questions. We'll also scoop them up at the end. So we just talked earlier about picking one use case and why investors really like when you do. There's other reasons. You make the most of your marketing spend when you do that by focusing. You end up being more productive. So you're trying to narrow down the group of people you're trying to reach. And for this just one use case that you pick first, you may pick others later, but here's a filter to help you validate your thinking to make sure you're on track. You want to check to make sure that your use case is responsive to the current market demand dynamics. What are people buying? And it should take into account the changing competitive landscape. What do your competitors bring to the table today? And a third thing that I always like to check is the industry issues. Double check that it fits into the major trends that are currently defining your audience. As Mitch said, government regulations, blockchain gets introduced. There's a labor shortage in America. So manufacturing is hiring, is taking on more automation, just all these different effects on your choice of use cases. And I have a process for absorbing this information, this qualitative approach. And it's really based on collaboration. Because you have a lot of smart people on your team, and you can reach out to a lot of smart people that know about the industries. So as you talk to clients and learn more, you're going to learn more about this industry you've chosen. And if you are a technologist, you can take like a software approach, an agile approach with sprints, just like software. Take your findings and bring them back to the team and brainstorm the next steps, and have every discipline on your team represented too. So you get all those different points of view. And, ultimately, by talking to lookalike prospects, clients, people in the target industry, your personal network, you're going to end up translating your offerings features into solutions for buyers. And you're going to address problems that your buyers are trying to solve. And you're framing that story in your prospect's language. And then ideally, you're mapping your offering to your buyer's requirements and challenges so buyers can clearly see your value. And this sort of addresses that earlier question from Aaron, I think it was, what happens when your use case either succeeds or falters? So when you pursue a use case, you can, when you land those first clients, your first beachhead accounts, when you land one from there, you can expand along a whole bunch of different vectors. You can sell other folks in the same industry because now you have a case study. You can sell the same solution into other industries. You can offer to sell the same solution with different partners who have access to different relationships and different clients. And this slide is important because I think channel partners represent shortcuts to your success, quite frankly. And there's a million different kinds of partners, but think about all the things they bring to the table. They know the space already. They understand the client issues. They have relationships with all the players already. They already speak the language. They already might be bringing some to the table to augment your offering with their own. So their stature opens doors. They could have more feet on the street. One of the greatest decisions I ever made was to have Cisco be a partner of an interactive video technology product we had. They had 10,000 salespeople out there. They covered geography better. They covered every account. So they have more feet on the street, geographic coverage. Often they've got a joint marketing budget that they can help you with to do outreach. So having taken all this into consideration, let's focus on the first step. How do you get that first beachhead client? And a good time for me to turn it over to Mitch.
Excellent. So we're going to continue the fast process so we can leave a little bit of question at the end. In the beginning, all about finding early adopters. And here's how to look for an early adopter and know what you're looking for. These are the folks that can see the value in an incomplete solution, have potential to help you find other product opportunities, if not the one you currently have. And then they're typically a leader. Early adopters have a great understanding of what's available in the market. They also have a higher tolerance for risk and a great ability to see the potential of new products. So they're a better buyer. And in fact, early adopters are kind of like your strategic product marketing strategy. So figuring out a way to co-create with them is a term that's often used, but they are they think of them more as a partner than a customer. So on that, how to recognize a B2B early adopter, they're looking for a competitive edge. They have the ability to find new uses for a technology. They are seeking out and signing up for early trials and beta. They often exert some level of functional leadership in their company. Although they may not be in the leadership, they might hold just like the thought leadership around it or subject matter expertise. And they will use a product that's incomplete. And you figure that out by doing interviews or conversations, either because you sold them or pre-selling. And then initially, 2 ways to get to these early adopters is create interest in the story behind the company and the founding team. And you see a lot of the heralded success stories, that's exactly what they do. Not only that, but the better ones even create a story and an interest around the benefits of what your company or that company is contributing to a larger good. So both of those are part of a company vision. And there are several reasons why a company vision is critical. It clarifies decisions, it centralizes decisions, it makes those decisions easier to have, and it is probably your #1 source of motivating your team and early partners and even early customers. Lastly, your vision may or may not need to change based on all of what we've talked about, but even if it doesn't, you need to keep sharing it. And one of the best ways is to get your story out there. So I'll turn it over to Ron.
Oh yeah, thank you. So, I've said this a bunch of times on the slides that I spoke to, about you should be striving to be a thought leader. It's not a mystery. It's not that hard to be a thought leader. Think about it. You're talking to experts every day as part of your work. You're accumulating knowledge. No one has got as much focus on a singular topic as much as you do. And so if you're passionate about your topic, you're constantly absorbing information about the latest trends in your space, you're curating the internet on behalf of your followers and people in your space, plus you're talking to others who are also hip deep into the same subject. And what you learn from those encounters is really unique to you. So I suggest you should really share this information with the world. Use your social presence to publish. Be informative. Think about it. You talk to your clients, you know things, you can write about what you learn. And so when people Google you, they're going to see you're an expert. And people will invite you to come to their offices just to hear what you think. And you're not there to just sell them. You're there to be a peer and part of the same community. And so the result is when your potential customers encounter you, they can tell they're going to learn something invaluable. They're going to get insights. They're going to be inclined to invite you to their offices for a discussion. And really, what better payoff can you ask for? You're not fighting to get appointments. You're being invited. So, by the way, the care and feeding of your social presence doesn't have to take a lot of your time. I always say, give it 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. And don't make it all mercenary about yourself. Publish what you learn. Curate the internet for things. If you find it interesting, so will your community. And when your buyers see what you publish, what you know, who you are, they'll get a positive feeling when they ask the ultimate question, is this someone that I want to work with? And so we did a good job there, Mitch, speeding it up and putting the giddy up on this presentation. So Mitch, I think it's probably a good time to do a wrap up.
Sure thing. So in summary, we've kind of, we talked about a lot of things, but number one, it was strategy first, then tactics. Number two, pick a problem worth solving. Ron then showed about IDing the optimal market, building relationships with clients. I took a little detour and tried to address things from an investor lens, which you should as well, because you're trying to balance those things. And the name of the game in the early stages is finding those early adopters and then using that to land and expand. Leveraging partners is one of the keys to success. And then we talked a little bit about sharing the vision. That helps with every single stakeholder. In order to get those meetings, you should try being a thought leader.
Yeah,
so
great.
That's the summary.
I think I'm going to turn it over to Parin to do just the final thank yous.
Yeah, thanks again, everybody, to joining the webinar here. If you guys still have any questions, I know we have ran out. I know I've gotten the questions from here, and what I will do, I will forward that to you, Mitch and Ron. You can probably answer her directly. I think that would be the best use of time for us right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, in any case, please do join our platform, ncBuilders.club. And we continue to provide a lot more services and a lot more, like Ron mentioned earlier, social networking or social media is not really networking. So do join our events and our platform. Mitch?
Yeah. So feel free if you want to chat. Happy to answer questions. We typically try to solve problems around investor relations, product success, and sales momentum. All those are free game.
That's great. And this is Ron. So I really was, earlier I said how excited I was to join this conversation because I love launching products. And I offer anybody who's been on this call or watching the on-demand version, you can have a free 30-minute dialogue, no obligation, because it's puzzle solving. I bet you'll get a kick out of it, and maybe we'll come up with something just spitballing on the phone. But happy to talk to anybody, as an on-demand marketing and sales resource. Might be able to help you take some additional shortcuts to success. So we've got our contact information up here, and I think we'll leave it up. You can just hit our websites, contact us, do outreach, and we'll leave it up here for the closing. But probably a good time to just see, are there any other last questions?
Yeah.
Before we wrap up.
Yeah, please. We can now pretty much open it up. If because the folks who are here, I don't know if you have still other engagements, but if there's anything that you guys want to share, please unmute yourself and talk. Anybody?
Maybe there'll be a question that comes in, but I want to share an anecdote in the meantime. I talked about how you can carve out a spot for yourself in your community. My wife is a reading tutor, and she did a couple correct things. So she tutors young people, teaches them how to learn to read. More importantly, she teaches these kids how to love reading. And she has a really good brand. She's the reading whisperer. That probably comes from having a marketing guy as a husband, but she does spend 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening sharing interesting information with this community of Libertyville and Vernon Hills and whatnot, Libertyville moms about things that they want to know, what to talk to your kids about at dinner instead of asking them how school was, what books to read, what they could get out of books. And like I said, for just a few minutes in the morning and the afternoon, she is definitely a known resource in her particular community, someone that everybody can rely on. And I have to say, the families that send their kids to Peggy, the Reading Whisperer, to learn how to read and learn to love to read, they love her. And I just have to say, what a win that is. None of my clients have ever loved me. Sometimes they can barely tolerate me, but the notion of them actually loving me, I think, is pretty cool. So, yeah, did any questions come in?
No, nothing yet. So I guess we're going to wrap it up. Just the one question that we got from Aaron, and I'll forward you guys that thing, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, the on-demand people, shoot us a note. We all have contact pages on our websites. If you've got another question for any of or all of us, key it in there and ask it, or just reach out for a phone conversation. It's easy enough to get scheduled. You can actually schedule yourself on my calendar. I'm sure it's true for these other guys too.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks again for all joining, and thanks again, Mitch and Ron, for your presentation. We love it. And have rest of the good day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody,
for the week.
your time.
Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure.